S24 Ultra or Pixel 8 Pro? Which one has the best camera in the Android world? And which one should you go for? Well, we have 23 categories to compare to help you make that choice. The first thing to consider here is that Samsung is using some truly impressive camera hardware, with a 200 megapixel main sensor and dual telephoto modules, a 3x and a 5x. Whereas Google is using a more modest 50 megapixel sensor with only one telephoto module at 5x. But Google is very well known for their impressive image processing, so I'm quite curious to see how Google stacks up against Samsung's powerful hardware. Starting off with some bright outdoor shots, I'm generally surprised by how similar they look. The only differences are that the Pixel has slightly more contrast if you take a look at the trees in the far distance. The Pixel also exposes the tree on the left a bit better, while being sharper if you take a look at the tree branches. In our second shot, again, we can see a very similar result between the two, with the Pixel once again having more contrast. Bright areas such as the sky or the tree here are much brighter on the Samsung, but other than that, the processing is identical here. Our last outdoor shot is where we can finally see some difference, with the Pixel having less contrast this time and bringing up the shadows, as opposed to Samsung's more contrasty look. And surprisingly, the Pixel is once again sharper if you zoom into the grass. But realistically, when it comes to outdoor shots, they're pretty much identical. So what about indoor shots? Well, in this first example of Ren working hard, I'm surprised by how much better the Pixel photo is. Not only is it noticeably brighter, but the colors are way more vibrant, and even the textures are far more detailed. You'll see this if you take a look at Ren's hair, where you can see Ren's individual hairs so much better on the Pixel. Not really sure what happened to Samsung's shot here. In this next indoor shot, Samsung performed much better than before, likely due to having more light. The Pixel did manage to retain more highlight detail if you take a look at a window, and the Pixel also has a sharper image. If you zoom into the lights, the difference is actually quite noticeable. And lastly, something that a lot of people take a photo indoors of is food. And here, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between the two. The colors are basically identical. The S24 Ultra has a slightly sharper burger sauce, with maybe some crispier chicken too, but they both tasted delicious here. At least that's what Harry thinks. He cooked and took this photo. Overall, if you take a lot of indoor shots, the Pixel is going to be the better choice. So what about zoom? We're gonna start off at 2x, which is where both phones would be using their sensor crop feature. And here, Samsung is a bit brighter and also more detailed. If you take a look at the A560 text, the Pixel has more noise. If we move on to 3x, which is where Samsung would be using its dedicated 3x module, the S24 Ultra is more detailed if you take a look at the text, although it does have more noise if you take a look at the red cone. And considering that the Pixel is just zooming in digitally here, I am quite impressed. If we move on to 5x, this is where they would both be using their dedicated 5x modules, and here, the leaves are noticeably more detailed on the S24 Ultra. And same goes for the sign, which looks higher res on the S24 Ultra too. Moving on to 10x, where both would be zooming in digitally from their 5x modules, and Samsung is doing a much better job here. The texture in the brickwork is far more defined, the wood at the top is also more detailed, and the entire image is also more vibrant compared to the fairly washed out look on the Pixel. If we move on to 25x, which is the maximum zoom level on the Pixel is indeed more blurry, but it's also got more of a natural look to it, whereas Samsung clearly applied a lot of sharpening in post. The S24 Ultra can also zoom up to 100x. If you pinch into the Pixel's 25x photo, you can kind of get it to a similar level, and here the S24 Ultra is again superior, but that is mostly due to its AI processing. So if you take a look at the actual Bupa logo, it looks more accurate on the Pixel, whereas Samsung did distort the letters quite a bit. So if you care about zoom, Samsung will give you better results at the expense of a lot of image processing, whereas Pixel tends to keep things more natural, even at longer ranges. But you know what looks great, no matter what phone you're using? Our brand new Sahara Summits pack for our app wallpapers. Sahara Summits was designed by Wallrod, aka Mathy, the creator of some of our most stunning wallpaper packs before. I actually requested this pack from Matthew myself. I loved Apple's Mojave wallpapers before, and I asked him if he could make a minimal Mojave style pack for us, and this is what he came up with. These are some of my favorite wallpapers ever. They look pretty awesome on a phone, but they will look even better on a desktop, as you get the full view. Like, just take a look at how awesome these wallpapers look. This one, for example, or this one, or this one. This is probably my favorite. And then this one. Like, they're so good, and we have 10 of them. You can check our Sahara Summits pack in wallpapers. Simply search for it in the App Store or Play Store, or use the link below. Okay, now when it comes to the ultrawides, in this shot, if you take a look at the sky, there is quite a lot of banding and artifacts in Samsung's photo. If we zoom into the building on the left, the brickwork texture is more defined on the Pixel. Yet, the fence in the middle is clearer on the Samsung, and same goes for the water. Our second ultrawide is very similar on both, with Samsung's image being a bit brighter, but overall, the level of detail is almost the same. The Pixel is a bit sharper in the middle and the top left branches, but other than that, this is basically the same image. Now, if we compare the quality of the ultrawide indoors, where we have less light, this is where Samsung performs better. The leaves in the foreground are more detailed. Same goes for the circular artwork at the top and a number of other areas too. However, you do have to pixel peep to even see these differences, so I think that you'd be generally happy with either of them when it comes to the ultrawide. Now, both ultrawides also support macro mode, which works surprisingly well. The Pixel does a slightly better job in terms of both the color and the detail if you take a look around the letter U, while Samsung seems to have a shallower focus here. Moving on to portrait mode, Samsung can also take portrait mode shots using its 5x module, which look really nice. The Pixel can only take portrait shots at 1x and 2x. And here, I do prefer the colors on the Pixel. But when it comes to the edge separation, Samsung does a better job in terms of my hair, my coat, and also the rail bar. It did mess up the processing of my coat, which ended up looking very noisy though. You can also use portrait mode on pets, and here, the Pixel isn't bad. In fact, it actually did an even better job than Samsung at separating Ren's hairs from the background. But when it comes to the overall look and the background blur, if you showed Samsung's photo to someone, you could easily fool them that it was taken with a dedicated camera. And lastly, we have a portrait shot of an object, which both phones can take, and here, the edge separation on the Pixel is almost perfect, whereas Samsung messed up on the plant in the center, and even the one on the right is having some issues. So I'm just surprised that portrait mode person has worse edge separation on the Pixel than both pet and object, which are surprisingly good, since person is easier to do than pet and object, so really strange. Now, if you like editing your photos, both phones support these advanced pre-edited RAW modes. So we have Expert RAW on the Samsung and Google Pixel. Yes, this is how Lightroom is seeing it on the Pixel. Both give you an edited RAW photo, which is a good starting point for your edits. And this is how they both look before any edits. We can see that the Pixels actually has more highlight detail by default. And this is how they looked after I've tried to recover the most amount of highlights and shadow details on both. The shadow detail is about the same, although Samsung has this weird green hue going on, whereas the Pixel remains more natural. If we look at a highlight detail in the sky, the Pixel is able to recover more of it, and on top of this, the Pixel also has a more natural looking image, whereas Samsung seems to have overly sharpened it. So yeah, definitely not the look that I want from my RAWs. Therefore, if you want to shoot in RAW, the Pixel is the better choice. Now, despite their high-resolution sensors, both phones take their photos in 12 megapixel resolution by default, which gives us lower file sizes, better low-light performance thanks to pixel binning, and also better image processing in daytime. However, if you want to take photos at the full resolution of their sensors, you do have this option as well. And here, I am honestly surprised by how low-res the Samsung looks, despite having 4 times the resolution. This is most likely due to Samsung's desire to overly sharpen their images. So yeah, I do really hope they fix this in a future software update because it doesn't look good. The good news is that if you take Samsung's photos at 50 megapixels, which you can also do, they will actually be sharper than the Pixels. Part of this is again due to Samsung's sharpening, but in most places of the image, like these round containers, there is generally a bit more detail in Samsung's photo. So if you want to take these super high-res photos, then the 50 megapixel mode on the Samsung is the best option. Moving on to video, Samsung can shoot 8K 30 as well as 4K 120, whereas the Pixel can only go up to 4K 60. Now, I don't personally use 8K 30, but if you do happen to have an 8K TV or you like zooming into your footage afterwards, you do have this option. Plus, you can now shoot 8K on the 5x zoom module too, which results in some crazy level of zoom, as you can crop it afterwards, for video. And 4K 120 lets you slow down your footage if that's something that you want to do. So if we compare 4K 60 video on the Pixel, we have a more balanced looking image. You don't get those bright yellow areas where the sun shines, but instead everything is more toned down with stronger shadows, more contrast, and also a noticeably sharper looking image, which is especially noticeable if you pause the video. Moving on to ultrawide video, this time around the Pixel's footage is extremely soft and very noisy. This simply shows that no matter how much processing you do, the hardware is still very important, and the Pixel's tiny pixels on its 48 megapixel ultrawide module just cannot capture enough light as opposed to Samsung's 12 megapixel module. Reason why the footage looks so soft and so noisy. Both phones can also do slow motion in 1080p at up to 240 frames per second, with Samsung also giving you the option of shooting slow-mo at 4K 120. But since we're talking about slow-mo, we want to get the slowest footage possible, so at 240 frames per second, they're both just as slow as each other. But the Pixel has a ton of noise, and our lights are also flickering in the Pixel's footage, whereas Samsung's footage is incredibly clean. So if you want to take slow-mo videos, the S24 Ultra is the way to go. Both can also shoot portrait mode video. However, the S24 Ultra's footage is 4K as opposed to 1080p on the Pixel. Although looking at both side by side, at least in the first part of the clip, the S24 Ultra looks lower res than the Pixel. It does get better later on, but still, it never ends up looking like true 4K footage. The edge separation is definitely better on the Samsung, although not great, so yeah, portrait video does need a lot of work on both. Both also support action mode, which is the super steady mode for when you're shooting action-based content. The Pixel's footage is in 1080p 30 as opposed to Samsung's Quad HD 60. And honestly, no action mode footage should be in 30 FPS. So that immediately disqualifies the Pixel. And on top of this, the Pixel's footage is significantly less stable and also significantly noisier. Like, the only upside to the Pixel is that it has a wider field of view, but other than that, Samsung has a superior action mode in every single way. So what about night mode? Well, we'll start with some photos first. And here, Samsung has this strange look, as if there was some filter applied. The Pixel's photo is way more natural. If you take a look at the bridge or the buildings on the left, everything is more contrasty and looks more natural on the Pixel. Taking a look at our second night shot, this one's better on the S24 Ultra. The reflection on the light is noticeably reduced, the grass is also sharper, same goes for the tree branches, and in our last night mode shot, Samsung is once again sharper. There is more detail if you take a look at the buildings in the distance, or the sign on the lamppost, and I also like that Samsung managed to expose the lamp properly, as you can even see the dirt inside. However, I do prefer the overall look on the Pixel shot. The colors look way more natural, and we don't get that lens flare and the glow that Samsung's image has. So overall, if you take a lot of night mode photos, the Pixel will give you more natural colors, while the Samsung will give you a sharper looking image. So what about night zoom? Well, at 5x, Samsung has a cleaner image with less noise, whereas the Pixel is overly sharpened, something that we've seen from Samsung's daytime photos. However, the Pixel does seem to have a more natural detail too if we zoom into the sign here. You still cannot read it, but you can see more of it on the Pixel. Zooming in further to 10x, here Samsung has more noise, while the Pixel is noticeably sharper. So in low light, the Pixel does do a better job when it comes to zoom. So what about the ultrawides at night? Well, we know that the Pixel has inferior hardware, so can its software really save it? And the answer is yes. Samsung's night ultrawide is incredibly noisy. However, you can definitely tell that the Pixel applied a ton of noise reduction, as its photo looks very soft and blurry. Samsung's is much sharper. Moving on to night portrait, this was shot at 2x with night mode on both. And I am genuinely surprised by how good the Pixel's night portrait is. Like, I don't know what Samsung did here, but it just destroyed my face entirely. Like, I look dead here. I do prefer the background blur on the Samsung, but other than that, Google did a much better job, even when it comes to the colors, which were way too warm on the S24 Ultra. Which brings us to night video. And here, I was genuinely hoping that Samsung would bring us a dramatically improved night video, thanks to all of their AI processing. And I'm glad to see that this is actually true. Samsung's video is significantly more detailed than the Pixel's, and it also has much less noise. Now, Google does support Vision Boost, which essentially processes your night video on Google's own servers and then gives you back a significantly better low-light footage. However, this does take quite a bit of time. For example, for just a 10-second clip, it took between 30 to 40 minutes to process, so do keep that in mind. We've also tested night zoom video, as Samsung mentioned that it's improved this year. And yes, the difference between the two is even more staggering than regular night video. And this is just at 5x. If we switch to 10x, I mean, the Pixel shot is just noise city. I feel like Vision Boost is honestly a must-have on the Pixel. Of course, it does take a long time to process, which I'm not really a fan of. But if you are using the Pixel 8 Pro, do make sure that you have Vision Boost turned on. So what about their front-facing cameras now? Well, in terms of daytime, I'm once again very surprised by how similar the image processing is between them. The S24 Ultra is a bit sharper if you zoom into my hair, while the Pixel has a slightly wider field of view. Now, when it comes to front night, I'm not really a big fan of any of them here. The Pixel messed up the colors quite badly as everything looks way too yellow, whereas the Samsung overprocessed my face and gave me this super waxy look. So if I were to post any of them, I would post the Samsung, as it does kind of have more background separation, which does make it look in a way like a portrait shot, even though it's not, and I do quite like that. Moving on to front video, I'll let you guys watch this one first. Okay, so this is a front-facing video test between the S24 Ultra and the Google Pixel 8 Pro. So let me know what you think of the quality. Take a look at the HDR processing, the highlights, the shadows, and let me know which one sounds better. Is it the S24 Ultra or is it the Pixel 8 Pro? Okay, so when it comes to the image quality, the Pixel did mess up quite badly at first when the sun was right behind me. It struggled with exposing the shadows correctly, which ended up looking very noisy. However, later in the footage, they were quite similar, with the Pixel having a more natural look compared to the S24 Ultra, which had this green cast on my coat. Mic-wise, the S24 Ultra was louder, but also way more distorted. The Pixel was far clearer. When it comes to front portrait, there is just no comparison. Samsung is simply miles better, not just in terms of the overall look and image processing, but also when it comes to the edge separation. Although not perfect, Samsung did do a better job at separating my hair from the background as opposed to the Pixel, and my face was also sharper on the Samsung too. So in the end, should you go for the S24 Ultra or the Pixel 8 Pro if the camera is really important to you? Well, if zoom is very important for you, then the S24 Ultra is going to be a slightly better choice in daytime at least. The S24 Ultra is also a better choice if you care about video. Yes, regular video outdoors is very similar, but at night you'll see a much better result from the S24 Ultra. And this applies to the Ultrawide in lower light and the zoom modules as well. Same goes for the special video modes like slow motion and action mode. The S24 Ultra is a better choice here too. Now, if you want to take some great portrait mode shots, the S24 Ultra is once again the way to go, both day and night. And even for selfies, I would still pick the S24 Ultra due to its sharper images and better selfies at night. But that's most of the boxes ticked for the S24 Ultra. So what should you pick the Pixel for? Well, if there is one place where the Pixel is really good at, that is simply color. Pretty much all shots taken on the Pixel were extremely color accurate, night photos especially. Indoor shots were also much better on the Pixel, and the raw photos had more dynamic range and were easier to edit on the Pixel as well. So if you're looking for some great results all across the board, aside from maybe night video, the Pixel 8 Pro is still a great choice. And keep in mind that it is also significantly more affordable than the S24 Ultra. At the end of the day, the differences between the two weren't that big. I was surprised to see how similar the image processing was in a lot of cases, so I honestly think that you'll be happy with either of them. Do let me know which one you've ended up going for, and do stay tuned for our upcoming comparison and videos on the S24 Ultra. I'm Daniel, this means ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.